Every time the regime makes a move, whether it's rolling out a new policy, whether it is upping their repression, trampling on rights, even just like a press conference, they open themselves up to the opportunity to screw up. They expose themselves to the risk of making an entirely unforced error, but then there's another layer to it as well. We have a role to play because when they make a move, we get to make a counter move. When they act, we get to react. That's why I'm always saying it is not so much what the regime does, it is entirely how we choose to respond, because we, the people, actually have far more power than the regime. The regime is very weak, very weak. Autocratic rulers are incredibly weak. Our power is diffused over 340 million people. So in order for us to flex it effectively, we have to come together and we have to use that power in a collective way. But we are still far more powerful. So when they do something, we have a chance to make it backfire on them. People often refer to this as the backlash effect. Another way that experts, including Dr. Erica Chenoweth, refer to it as making repression backfire. Hang on, I gotta put my knitting down so I can read. I can't knit and read and film a video at the same time. Now, I know I speak frequently about making repression backfire, and I want to give you an example today from Dallas, Texas. And it's not just Dallas, actually, it's multiplying around the country. But first, I want to read something that Chenoweth and Maria Stephan had to say. They're experts on nonviolent resistance, what they have to say about repression backfiring. Okay, look, they mention repression backfiring like a gajillion times in this book. I just want to read this small section. According to Chenoweth and Stephan, when repression does backfire, there are four main ways that it comes back to bite the regime in the butt and strengthens our movement. Backfiring often occurs when an unjust act, often violent repression, recoils against its originators, leading to power shifts by increasing internal solidarity of the resistance campaign. We've seen that over and over and over again, particularly recently in Minnesota, where not only was local resistance finding that they were coming together and increasing their solidarity, but also connecting cities and connecting resistors all over the US to Minnesota. It's that broad-based solidarity spanning the entire country that very, very much has increased with rapid pace since the crackdown in Minnesota and the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. The second way their repression backfires is by creating dissent and conflicts among the opponent's supporters. We're really seeing this with Republicans in the House when it comes to the Epstein files. Now that they're looking at unredacted material, I've seen a number of MAGA Republicans who are really horrified, and their position is shifting. In particular, Nancy Mace had a full-on meltdown during a press conference and said she doesn't have any faith in Donald Trump's DOJ and that horrific crimes have been committed. Like she's seen what's in there. The third way that it creates a backfire is by increasing external support for the resistance campaign. You're seeing people who were previously checked out or not particularly interested in investing in the resistance suddenly getting pissed off by the regime and being like, I want to help the folks who are opposed to that nonsense, to that violence, to that awfulness over there. And lastly, it can decrease external support for the regime. Maybe there were foreign governments or billionaires, CEOs, who previously maybe would have been loyal supporters of Donald Trump. And those pillars of support they're not too anxious to keep propping him up, especially not publicly, especially not when it's pissing off all of the American people. Okay, so let's talk about a specific example. We are seeing Stephen Miller and Donald Trump, DHS, attempt to purchase all of these massive freight warehouses around the country and turn them into concrete concentration camps, windowless concrete boxes to keep 10 or more thousand people for undetermined periods of time. Geo Group and CoreCivic, the two corporations that get billions and billions and billions of our tax dollars every single year to keep people in detention centers, will be running these. This is a huge, lucrative, for-profit venture for these corporations. Running concentration camps is big business in Donald Trump's America. It's also Stephen Miller's ultimate goal for what he wants to do in this country. Hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million people kept in concrete boxes, and the American taxpayer paying for it. And then they're going to churn through all of the immigrants. What are they going to do next when they've purchased these warehouses for exorbitant sums of money? $38 billion of American taxpayer money. $38 billion. That is just an unbelievable amount of money is going to buy concentration camps around the country, or at least they would like to use it to purchase concentration camps around the country. And DHS thought they would do this like down low, real quiet, right? Real quiet like, and nobody would know that it was happening until it was already done. Okay, well, y'all give me a minute just to spitball here. No evidence whatsoever. I want to speculate a little bit because I live in a neighborhood where a nasty freight warehouse got put in and the community fought against it. And Ted Wheeler and our city council were like, nothing we can do. We got to be friendly to this mega out-of-state corporation owned by a billionaire. They're going to put a nasty diesel freight warehouse where you guys wanted a community center, but we got to prioritize big business, right? Businesses have rights too. So we couldn't stop it. But at the time that we were working on trying to stop it, we were looking through all of the data and realizing that these warehouses were incredibly overbuilt around the country, right? 2021, 2022. There was this massive movement to buy up land, often this is a residential neighborhood, right? Buy up land and put in these huge freight warehouses because we saw so much like buying things through Amazon in 2020 when we were all in lockdown. And I thought, like, this market is way oversaturated. It's massively oversaturated. This doesn't make sense to me. Why would they want to put another freight warehouse here? Prologis is already the largest owner of industrial land in Portland. There's already an even larger freight warehouse, like literally just across the street and down the road, right by Costco, that is mostly vacant. Why are they doing this? It didn't make sense to me. And the theory at the time was they're trying to lock their competitors out from being able to access this land. I speculate a little bit whether or not these corporations, which overwhelmingly support Donald Trump and the Republicans, were already in the works on something like this with Stephen Miller. Because Geo Group and CoreCivic, they were operating detention centers back then, both here in the U.S. and one of them, I can't remember which one now, also operates detention centers, prisons in South Africa. I wonder if this wasn't already in the works, building out these big freight warehouses that they could never find tenants for. Now they've been sitting vacant for a year or two. And suddenly Stephen Miller's like, oh, look, I have all of these perfect locations to turn into concentration camps. They're just sitting vacant. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to swoop those up, and I'm going to turn them into places to stash 10,000 people. And then they will turn into forced labor camps, and then they'll turn into death camps. I realize I'm spitballing. I realize, maybe some investigative journalists could do some digging on that. How long has this plan been in the works? But they thought they would implement it really quietly and that nobody would find out. We all found out. It's all over the news. Everybody knows about it. And that has activated resistance groups, grassroots resistance groups all over the country to figure out, there's empty warehouses in my neighborhood. Is Stephen Miller trying to buy them up? I don't want a concentration camp in my town. Absolutely not. We saw Kansas City, through tremendous public pressure and local elected officials, get the owner of the warehouse there to back out of the sale of that building to DHS. And now we are hearing from the Dallas Morning News that the owners of a Dallas County warehouse that ICE had planned to use as a mega detention center will not sell their property to DHS. Mayor Mario Vasquez of Hutchins, Texas, says God answered our prayers after he learned that the company had decided they will not sell. ICE's own internal documents showed that they were seeking that building to turn into a concentration camp. I don't give a shit if they call it detention center. We know what it is, to hold 9,500 human beings. For comparison, Fort Dix, which is the largest federal prison in the United States, has currently 4,070 inmates. I also just want to point out there are 153,000 people in federal prison and 2 million incarcerated across the United States. I think we can and should look at the ways that what's happening with DHS detention right now is, one, a logical extension of the ethnic cleansing that our country has been waging for hundreds of years against Indigenous Americans, and two, is a logical extension of the carceral state, which impacts Black men disproportionately. We have to understand that these things are all connected. Republicans and Democrats are both not down with this plan to spend tens of billions of dollars warehousing human beings. And on top of that, NIMBYs don't want these in their neighborhood. Nobody wants a concentration camp in their backyard. So the regime thought that they would just ramp up and accelerate their ethnic cleansing plan to create these giant concrete concentration camps. And that immediately elicited a backlash from people all over the country. They thought they would advance their plan and they would do it real sneaky like, and it would be fine. And no, instead, people are organizing all over the country to push back. And in places where these warehouses have already sold, El Paso and San Antonio, for example, local organizers and local governments can still look at land use laws, zoning, permitting. What are the ways that we can get real creative here and make this attempt at the escalation of repression backfire?